Hello. Hi.
Oh, hey, Adrian.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How's it going?
Fantastic. Yeah. So, thanks for agreeing to speak with me about the recent news.
Yeah, this is absolutely mind blowing. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's honestly my pleasure, and I'm looking forward to what me and my listeners can learn. Um,
Totally.
so so for those folks who don't know, I guess like I only found out through Facebook that Logan's has sent out a letter to say that they're permanently closing.
Yeah, yeah. It's an absolutely devastating blow to all the artists and all the patrons that have flooded Logan's for like 20 years. I mean, everybody has a Logan's memory in Victoria.
One or two or three, I imagine.
Yeah, most of them, they can't really remember the ending.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Everybody remembers how they got to Logan's. Nobody actually remembers leaving Logan's.
Classic. Yeah.
Totally.
Cool. Well, for myself, I mean, I almost feel bad like an outsider. Like we have a good friend who lives on North Park Street, like a block away, and so we spend time at his place a fair bit. And I've been to Logan's for like an afternoon drink with him a couple of times. He's
Yeah.
gone to a lot of nighttime shows because he has an acquaintance who's sort of connected with the music community and setting up shows. So he sort of brought him there a few times. But for the most part, I have to say, I mean, I moved to Victoria in 2013. So, my roots in Victoria are relatively new. So, apart from seeing Logan's every time I go down to North Park, which is at least once a week, and apart from going there for a couple of afternoon drinks, I really don't know, the storied history that is in that place. So I'm looking forward to what you can share with us.
Yeah, totally. And like I'm an outsider as well. I think most of us in Victoria aren't actually from Victoria. So
Yeah, as well.
totally right. So like I only got to Victoria in 2007, but I don't think I started going to Logan's until about 2013. So when you got to the city yourself.
Right.
So my memories and I guess my reflections on my time at Logan's is only going to be based upon the last 7-8 years or so. But it was just like it was a staple point for so many people. Like they did such good for the community, and this was such a massive blow to so many artists who don't really have a home anywhere else.
Yeah, so talk to me about like the space in terms of artists. Like, was it like weekly shows or nightly shows, and what sort of artists played there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Logan's was the kind of place where you could do everything from like a punk show to a metal show to a drag show to
Wow.
fundraisers. Like you name the genre, Logan's was the place that you went. Logan's was the place that didn't care what you necessarily sounded like, and I don't mean that in a negative way. They just wanted to share the love of music, and Victoria has a dope music scene. Victoria's music scene is probably the best in North America, in my opinion. I think it would only like second Austin or maybe Portland. But the Victoria music scene is so tight. So I mean, if you look at what like the Hex or Vic City Rejects or what they did for Logan's and getting the word about their sound. I mean, that's not a sound that you would ever get at Bard and Banker or
Right.
Lucky. Well, maybe Lucky the odd night, but I mean, if you wanted to hear some weird music, Logan's was your venue.
Right.
So I mean, there's really Logan's closing has absolutely left a void in the Victoria music scene. Because right now, the only venues that I can think of, and I'm speaking as a small fries promoter, I own 2540 Productions, and like my primary home was the Loft, and I did promote out of Logan's once or twice, but Logan's was a place that you went to hear shit that you couldn't hear at any other venue unless you were paying for like a private house party or unless you had like you rented a community hall or you rented the Ukrainian Cultural Center as an example.
Right.
But like this is where music came to life. This is where you got a chance to like wear whatever you wanted, bang your head as hard as you wanted, and no one was going to judge you. Wow. Everyone was just so welcoming.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've walked by at night, at 11 o'clock at night and sort of seen the crowd hanging out and even chatted with a few people sometimes, and it just really seemed like that sort of a place. Um,
Absolutely. It was super inclusive. Like, it didn't matter where you were from. It didn't matter what you looked like. It didn't matter anything. If you had good energy to you and you just wanted to come in, listen to music, sit in the corner, have a beer, not say anything, that was cool. If you wanted to have a few beers and tear up the dance floor, that was also welcome. People that loved Logan's and respected Logan's knew who the regulars were and knew who, like, if it was your first time at Logan's, you stuck out like a sore thumb, but you were totally welcome. Right. And people would happily guide you on the dance floor or, to the bathroom or, what you needed to do. It was a fantastic venue.
Yeah, I mean, talk to me. Like, so I remember sitting in sort of a booth type seat and like sort of like some orange vinyl cushion on the wooden seat chair. And like, what is the history like to maybe the space, the physical space? Like, how big did it like hold? Like, I can just picture it being jam packed on a Friday night, with, or was it like, yeah, like what kind of place was it? Like, it seemed like a place that had a lot of stories. If the walls could talk, like, talk to me about the space.
Absolutely. Like every Friday night, the walls would tell you a different story.
Right.
So the walls that would be by the stage on the dance floor that would have like the little island bar that you could pull up a chair to, or like even along the back where the chips were and whatnot. Those walls would tell you like these are people who just want to dance, who want to listen to music. But on the opposite side, sort of like in front of the bar, you could sit down, you could have a conversation. The lights were always on a little bit brighter. Right. It catered to everybody. So like if you wanted to dance on a Friday night or you wanted to mosh on a Friday night or just like totally thrash on the dance floor, you had the option to do that. But if you wanted to sit back and like share some nachos or poutine with friends, you had the option to do that as well while still engaging in such amazing music and catching a view of anything that was going on in front of the bar on Cook Street when you look outside from your table. The staff there knew everybody. Paul was one of my most favorite people who worked there. And everybody would know your order. Everybody knew, like, yes, you were drinking Blue Buck, you were drinking PBR, you were having gin and tonic, and those were few and far between. But like everybody just knew everybody. It was like, I don't want to sound cliche, and I'm certainly not old enough to remember the series, but it was Cheers.
Like Cheers, yeah, where everybody knows the name.
Yeah, absolutely. And if they didn't know your name, they knew your drink order.
Right.
And that goes a long way when it comes down to checking out shows or finding a place to call your own on a Friday night after a long weekend of work, or even checking out the Hootenanny on Sundays with Carolyn Mark. I mean, she did a phenomenal job.
Talk to us about that. What's the Hootenanny?
Yeah, so the Hootenanny took place on Sunday afternoons. Carolyn Mark is a musical genius, and anybody in the Victoria music scene knows the brilliance of this woman and her red lipstick. But she made it very welcome. She made it so that if you were like super experimental, you could go up. If you were nervous, you'd have like a non-sexual pat on the bum, like, go on, kitten, you got this.
Very supportive.
Like, totally supportive. And she encouraged a lot of people to get out there and express themselves when perhaps they weren't maybe ready for any of the other jams in the city, or if they didn't feel comfortable with the other jams in the city. Carolyn Mark's Hootenanny was where you wanted to be on a Sunday afternoon.
Wow. What sort of, talk to us, you mentioned a couple of names earlier. Again, I feel woefully ignorant as to the music scene in Victoria. Who are some of the names that passed through there? Did they get their start there? Are there any folks who have gone on to, record a few albums? Talk to me a bit about that maybe.
So everybody there knows Don, and Don was the happy fella that you'd see taking your cash, checking your IDs, and welcoming you in to whatever show was going on. Don is a stupidly talented musician. He plays in Teenage Violet, and I'll jump back to him in a second, but he's also a wicked DJ. And if you walked in to Logan's, you would see Don. He'd always have a smile. He might be kind of grumpy, but he'd always have a smile to him. And he would make your night. and he was never a hard ass, and he has this appearance of looking like a hard ass, but he was never a hard ass. He was super chill all the time. Teenage Violets is one of my absolute most favorite bands in the city, and Dawn's a part of that. And if you ever saw Teenage Violets play on stage, you'd look at Dawn and you'd be like, man, I know that guy from somewhere. You'd be like, oh shit, it's the guy that checks my ID at Logan.
Wow.
And his energy on stage, and he always has this little like black toque on and his thick frame glasses, and he's just so rad. He's just so happy to be anywhere, and like he set the tone when you walked into Logan's.
Wow.
In terms of other bands, one of my personal favorites was seeing We Hunt Buffalo, and they're a band out of Vancouver. They have multiple EPs and albums out. They did this dope European tour a few years ago, and any time that We Hunt Buffalo was at Logan's, you could guarantee it was a sold-out show. The dance floor was always packed. People were just like bouncing up and down with energy. And it was a loud show. It was a loud show, but it was a good loud. It wasn't like an irritating, oh, my earballs are going to explode kind of loud. Like, it was a dope show. Who else has been there? Carla Olive has been there as well. And she has a number of projects going on. I think the latest group that she was with was her all-female rock project called Cecilia. And they've done tributes to women in rock and roll across the city for about 2 years now, I think. It didn't matter who was playing Logan's. You just went to Logan's.
Right.
Like, you were just there. It was your community pub, and it was a place where you could see, like, 3 bands for $10 or 3 bands for $15 on, like, a really expensive night. But every show that you went to at Logan was a show that you were, like, posting on Facebook later where you're like, dude, you should have been there. Like, this was off the charts. Like, this was just incredible. And that's why it's going to be such a hit to the Victoria music scene, because we've now lost a venue like this. There's no other venue in the city that could even come close to being Logan.
Yeah, I mean, I jotted that down as a question to sort of follow up with. So, I mean, with the closure of Logan's, and before that, actually, let's backtrack for 1 second because I did make a note here. Is there any sort of campaign afoot to possibly save Logan's, a GoFundMe campaign? Is it even something that the ownership would be interested in, or is this sort of like a done deal? This is for sure closed.
I wish I had the answer to that, man. I've seen a couple of friends on Facebook that are very talented musicians, or involved with lighting and sound in Victoria, who have actually posted that same question, like, what can we do to save this venue? I have no idea if the owners are open to offers or if anyone's open to anything, but with COVID, I mean, I don't know about you, but my checkbook is pretty tight right now. Like, I don't really have a lot of cash that I would be able to front to anything, and I can't imagine a lot of people would be in the same position taking a big risk like that, especially with everything going on with COVID, and we don't really know how long the pandemic's going to last for. I think that if there was enough interest, and if there were enough serious backers, and like, I mean serious backers, not just like, yeah, I got $10 I can throw into this, whatever. Yeah, yeah, I think that it would stand a chance, but to be honest, I'm not really too sure. I would love to see this venue saved, but I mean, are we just throwing money into something that
to a black hole? Yeah,
totally.
Well, I caught some news about sort of Herman's Jazz Bar, you know, like I guess maybe 6 months ago or actually a year ago already, when there was, you know, when patrons there sort of, I think collectively, and employees was it, purchased the bar.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I think it was like the View Street Music Society or something like that.
Okay. So yeah, but maybe something along, I don't know, like something along those lines, but.
You're absolutely right. And I mean, like, if you look at what the Hermans did against what Logan's potentially could do, you're talking to very, very different music crowds, though. I mean, on one hand, you're talking to a jazz society where you have your stereotype of jazz. And then on the other hand, you're talking to a stereotype of metal and punk. And both would be managed entirely differently. It's an interesting question that you're raising, because it'd be really cool to see what could potentially come of this. I would love to see Logan saved. I don't know how anybody in the city is going to be able to take that kind of risk right now. The same way that they took with Herman's.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely a different model, but I'm a big proponent of, sort of, when going gets tough, banding together and
Yeah, rally the troops, right?
exactly. And was it 26 years? Is that the number someone gave me 26 years. How long has Logan's been open?
I know it's been about 20. I can't remember.
It's a long time anyway, right? Like we're getting
Totally,
into
yeah.
decades, and it's like, it's just sort of it becomes a part of the block, right? Like the neighborhood, and it's just, for me, one of the reasons for doing this podcast, in the first place, is to sort of enhance community connections. Like I definitely feel that we're all disconnected, in many ways. COVID has sort of just exacerbated that, and then here's a casualty, that sort of it was a place for people, and like I said, maybe. Again, I'm not sort of a raucous kind of rah kind of guy. I'm more bookish, and I like to, I kind of maybe we got 2 young kids, so my wife and I, so I kind of maybe enjoy a quiet Friday night. But for the folks who go there, I see the value and the importance in that for the community, and especially the aspiring musicians who could really benefit from a place like that. So I think if there could be some sort of a campaign, possibly. I mean,
I'd love to see
yeah,
that. I'd love to see that. One of the things that I when I was promoting, because I'm on maternity leave myself right now.
Okay.
So I just had a baby in May, so she's a pandemic baby.
Congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, congrats to you as well.
Thank you.
But one of the things that I was when I was promoting, it, 2-3 nights a week for at least 2 years, right? I mean, we lost the Tally Ho. We lost My Bar. We lost the Canby. We've recently lost Bartholomew's as well as a live music venue. We just keep losing venues in Victoria. And when you think about it, it's like, whatever, My Bar, whatever, Canby, whatever. The thing is that these amount to 2 or 3 gigs a week.
Wow.
Right? So this is 2 or 3 gigs a week that now one specific venue is now losing, which means, and I'm terrible at math, so if I butcher this, please correct me.
Okay, we're not judging your math skills.
Okay, perfect. But I mean, if you look at it, right, and take My Bar as an example. So My Bar was located on the Gorge in the Howard Johnsons, and it would cater to bands like Spark and Jazz, Funked Up. It had the Deuce Blues Band for a while. But 2 shows a week ends up being 104 shows a year that a city loses, right? Every time a venue shuts down is another 104 shows a year.
Those are big numbers.
Down, which is massive. And when you consider the amount of venues that Victoria has lost in the last several years, it adds up.
And sorry, interject just to say, so when you're talking about all those closures, was this pre-COVID? Was this during COVID? Sort of what was COVID the final, like the straw that broke the camel's back? Like why all the closures?
Totally, yeah. Sorry, I should have mentioned that as well. The examples that I'm using are from pre-2018.
Okay.
So like well before COVID. And I mean, there's a number of reasons why venues close down. Straight up, the rent here is atrocious.
Right.
Leases here are insane.
Talk too. Like, can you give us some numbers? Like, what are we like? You mentioned like the Logan's. Like, what do they own the building, or do they lease?
I'm not sure about that, to be honest. I have no idea, and I wouldn't want to even speculate.
Okay.
I know that. I know that like my cost of living has gone up, and I know that your cost of living has gone up significantly in the last several years. If you look at where Podium used to be on, I think it was Yates Street. I always get downtown streets confused.
Yeah, me too. After all,
yeah. So it was all one-way streets. I have no idea where the hell I am. But if you look at Podium, whatever turned into Podium, and I'm so sorry, I can't remember the name right now. But they looked at doing live music for a while, and then the owners there, I had a meeting with them, and I'm not going to use names. I don't want to use names here, but I explained to them what the rate would be to get a band in for the night. And they sort of looked at me like, "What do you mean they're not going to play for beer?"
Wow.
Right? But beer doesn't pay for your jam space, man.
That's right.
Beer's not paying for your drums, like your
time.
amp tubes, your time, your
Mm-hmm.
hydro, right? So I mean, I have no idea what these places were paying in terms of their own leases, but if they're looking at asking bands to straight up pay to be paid in beer, I mean, there's a whole other ballgame that we got to talk about there.
Definitely.
Mm.
So the economics, I guess, are definitely a big thing here. As a music promoter and in Victoria as well, do you notice like what's the trend been over the last sort of 7-8 years that you've sort of been involved in the scene? Like, are we dropping off, or in terms of millennials, like folks in their 20s, are we going to more concerts, less concerts, or live?
Just from my own experience as both a patron and a promoter.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're losing venues, so this is my promoter brain talking right now, because we're losing venues and so many bands just want to play, a lot of bands are like, you know what, we'll take the flat of beer. Right. We'll do it for a flat of beer, we won't do anything.
Right.
And then on the flip side, there's bands that are like, no, we're worth so much more than this, and I agree with them. There are stupidly talented bands in this city that are worth so much more than just a flat of beer. But finding a place for them to play and then watching their own bills pile up, it's really disheartening that a lot of venues, even before the pandemic, aren't seeing the worth and the value in these musicians.
Right.
And the time that they have to put in and the effort that actually goes into putting on a show. You can't just get up there on stage and say, all right, yell a song at me.
Yeah.
Like you could, but I mean, like, no one wants to hear Freebird for
That's right.
4 songs in a row. It was an interesting time before COVID hit, and I mean, music's going to live, music's going to go on. It's a really sad time for live music right now in Victoria.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess COVID, like, like the Phillips Backyard Weekender was one big event canceled this summer. Rifflandia, I believe. Yep. I don't know if that was canceled even before COVID. I remember Rock the Shores, I think.
Oh, that was an amazing series when they had it going on. I saw the hip there, and it blew my mind.
Yeah, no, I'm always amazed at first the size that we are. 350,000 sort of in the Greater Victoria area. The musicians and the artists that we can bring to the city.
Absolutely.
The names are escaping me now, but Corey Hart came to Save on Food Memorial Center recently, and
just ZZ Top was there not too long ago as well.
That's right. So I mean, classics, right? And it's just sort of, and to think, I'm wondering, I mean, this is sort of a sidebar here, but it's sort of part of a larger conversation. Is technology, does that have a role to play with music? Like, it's just more accessible for all of us? We can get the exact songs that we want in the order that we want on our phones or wherever. We don't need to, like, maybe say 30, like in the 80s, pre-internet, like, maybe some of these shows were, like, it was exciting to go to a live show on a Friday night.
Yeah, and I think that raises a really good point as well, is because there's so much music out there now. I mean, like, we're not just limited to. So I'm gonna go Toronto right now, but we're not limited to what Q107 is doing. We're not limited to what the Edge is doing. We're not limited to what Hits FM is doing.
Right.
We're expanding because of Napster, essentially, in the long run, right? It's funny that you mentioned about technology and like the evolution of how we listen to shows and how we get our music. One local artist out here, I think his name is Aiden or Adrian Knight, and I'm so sorry, I can't remember which one it is. But if I remember correctly, he actually recorded his latest EP while in lockdown a few months ago, and he recorded it from like his little 2-bedroom apartment over the course of a weekend.
Wow.
And just, there's a song called 16 Stairs. And if you listen to it, you're listening like, how the hell did he record this in a spare bedroom? Because like, I'm talking to you right now from my daughter's bedroom, and it is echoey as hell in here. So,
yeah.
But like, I have no idea how he was able to record it. But like, technology is evolving. And I think what the pandemic has actually enabled a lot of artists in Victoria and around the globe to do is figure out, well, shit, this is my main income. How do I still make money while living my passion, while doing my passion as a full-time job?
Right.
And so people have shifted to online lessons or doing the online concerts, fundraisers. But I mean, there's so much music out there that it's almost hard to keep up with unless you know exactly what you're looking for, or you have a trusted friend who just has the same dope taste in tunes that you do. I mean, there's beautiful music out there, but there's a lot of noise as well. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next year or so. I mean, some artists, like we're talking like commercial artists that have, promised us new albums. I think Pussifer has a new album that comes out tomorrow. But they also haven't had an album in 5 years, so they've had time.
Wow.
But there's a lot to sort of digest with technology and how this is ultimately going to affect the local scene and how it's going to affect how we view shows. I think I remember hearing something. It was on the news either tonight or last night, where it said the Bard and Banker of the Irish Times is going to be linking in or like Zoom calling in to District Nightclub and having like a live music bingo going on. So the live music bingo is taking place in District, but everyone's going to be on their phones and like, I wish I could remember which one it was. It was either Bard and Banker or Irish Times. And you're going to be on your phone playing music bingo. Yeah,
well, I'll throw it up on the Facebook page. And any of the other links that you've mentioned too, I just want to assure you, we'll throw all those in the description.
Totally.
On Buffalo and Teenage Violets and some of these folks, because I do want to, propagate the promotion of, the local music scene and all that good stuff.
Yeah, totally. And everybody needs support right now. Everybody needs support. I think Teenage Violets are playing a Halloween show on October 30th, tomorrow night. But,
okay.
Yeah.
Indoor, outdoor, or online?
I believe both indoor and online. I'd have to double check. But I know that they were doing something at Victoria Event Center for a while. I mean, the thing about live events now too is that everything is so socially distant. There's only X number of tickets that are allowed to be sold.
Are out. Certain things that just went with going to a show.
Absolutely, and it's such a shame that Logan's wasn't able to find a way to coexist with these crazy times that we're currently living in. Because like I said, like their music, I mean, like they're the only place you could listen to punk in a city. They're the only place you could have like a metal drag queen show and a fundraiser for God only knows who.
And fill the place too.
Totally, like an absolute packet, and like have people legit waiting outside to see if somebody comes out and doesn't just go out for a puff and like leaves instead so that you can get in and get their slot.
Wow. And that, I mean, there's places, there's restaurants and like establishments in town that would kill for that type of, business,
right.
Yeah. And that as a question here, we can just check off my list. So Logan's, do you know, like, I don't know if you have an idea based on what you saw sort of personally, anecdotally, as a patron or as a, music promoter, did most of their revenues come from their shows? Like if they didn't have a show on, did they still bring in a lot of customers, or was it the shows that were really a draw?
As with any bar, I mean, every bar is going to have their regulars. Every bar is going to have their bar flies. Right. Logan's had a little bit more than usual just because of the kind of crowd you attracted. If you were dressed all straight up like in punk gear with like spiky leather coats and whatnot, you weren't really going to Milestones or Cactus Club.
Yeah.
you were going to Logan's.
Yeah.
Having said that, though, there were a lot of familiar faces that I see there. One of the things that I really liked about Logan's was their orphan dinners. And yeah, it would be like on Thanksgiving or Christmas.
Wow.
And I went to a few of these myself because I'm from Toronto. I don't have family out here. Before I had a daughter, I didn't have family out here, right? And what you could do for like $13 is you could go down to Logan's on Christmas Day and sit at a table with whoever the hell showed up, and you'd have turkey, cranberry stuffing, potatoes, dinner rolls, whatever, for like dirt cheap.
Okay, I might
And
actually cry now. I feel sad for this place. This is wrong. This place should not be closed down. This is really unfortunate. It really is.
yeah, it totally is, right? Because I mean, like, if I didn't have my daughter this year, like if I didn't have a family,
Mm-hmm.
100% I'd be at Logan's for Christmas dinner. And just as I have been at Logan's for Christmas dinner for easily 4 of the last 6 years.
Wow.
They made it welcoming. If you didn't have a home to go to, you had a home to go to.
Yeah.
Like it's not just music that people are losing out on, man. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a sense of community as well. And pubs, as we all know, bring people together. Everybody likes to have a pint after work,
Yep.
or like a glass of gin before bed or something.
Yep.
Like you would go out to a pub, and if Logan's was your home pub, Logan's was your home pub. Like you had a home there. You had family. Your regulars were your family.
Do most of the regulars, I don't want to use the past tense yet because, hopefully, never know, but do most of the regulars live in the North Park area, or does it sort of draw folks from all around the city?
I couldn't tell you, but anytime that I was there, it was folks from all around the city.
Wow.
Like I had friends from all around the city anytime that I was there. It wasn't just like North Park, Fernwood, Cooksbury Village. Like it was the Esquimalt.
Yeah.
It was the Gorge. It was James Bay.
Wow.
Yeah, it was one of those pubs where it didn't matter what you looked like. Everybody was welcome, and everybody was there for the music. Everybody was there just because they wanted to be there. The staff were awesome. The music was good. The food was all right. Beer prices were good.
Wow. Yeah, that's something I was thinking too as you were speaking. I mean, you often hear, there are certain incidents that are, connected sometimes with certain establishments, and you don't really hear anything, or I never really did hear anything about Logan's. There wasn't like a shooting or a stabbing out front, that I know of. You didn't hear it, and though it never came up in that type of way in the news.
Never. The kind of people that went to Logan's would be the first ones on the scene if they heard somebody got stabbed, making sure that guy was okay.
Or to prevent it in the first place.
Or to prevent it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. Absolutely. 100%. Anytime that I went to Logan's, I'm like, for the years that I went to Logan's, I went from like when I was like 125 pounds to like now I was 175 pounds.
Wow.
Like
Babies.
Yeah, no doubt, right? And it's all up top. But I never felt unsafe when I went to Logan's.
Right.
And even if I didn't know anybody there, I would know a face that I saw at the last show I was at. That'd be like, all right, this person's okay if I get into trouble, which I never did. But this is how girls think, because this is how we're programmed to think. It's like, okay, if I get into trouble, if anything goes down, that guy I've seen a million times here, or that chick I've seen a million times here, or I've said hello to that girl in the bathroom, or whatever. Logan's
really
wasn't sketchy.
So when they felt safe, single women going there felt safe. There weren't going to be drugs put in your drinks, or it felt safe.
If it was, I guess I wasn't targeted. But I mean, like, I've never heard of any of my friends going there and being concerned about their drinks. I've been to the clubhouse, I've been to the Strathcona. Like, those are the kind of places that I've had girlfriends drugged before. Logan's was not the kind of place that you got drugged at. Logan's was not the kind of place you went looking for bullshit fights or anything like that. Logan's was the kind of place that you went to have a good time, listen to good music, and be surrounded by like-minded people who were welcoming to everybody. Didn't matter who you were. You were welcome.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a huge loss for the scene. I have no other words. It's just a massive loss for the scene.
It definitely is, and I mean, me as an outsider, I can feel it. Just talking to you, and again, that's exactly why I want to have these conversations. And I think for other listeners in my position to hear these things, and for listeners who are connected to Logan, maybe to hear some things and be spurred to action. I can definitely say that I would donate to a GoFundMe campaign if someone would launch one. So
Absolutely.
Maybe that will be a thing, and I would definitely include a link in the description for something like that.
I know that I would love that as well. If there was a solid business plan in place, and there was a solid effort to save Logan's, and not just be like, oh, I want to save Logan's, but like, no, like, let's keep the doors open.
Mm-hmm.
I have a feeling that so many people in this city would go. I mean, like, you're looking at, 20 plus years of memories from countless artists, from countless patrons, with good memories from there, and like tribute shows, fundraisers, you name it. Like,
Yeah.
there's good people that were there. I mean, this is their home away from home that is shut down. And again, like they did Christmas dinners, they did Thanksgiving dinners for people that couldn't get home to their families. They took care of their community, and they were amazing about it.
Yeah, and just the history that sort of gets left behind. I mean, I'm imagining myself standing in an empty Logan's right now, just sort of, it's all dark. There's one light on over the bar, and it's just sort of quiet, and it's just, it's really disappointing to think of all the laughs and good times and energy that was in that building, and for that to potentially, no longer be there. So, we don't know what COVID holds for us. We don't know if there's a vaccine coming down the pipeline, or treatments, or where this thing is going. But I guess the restrictions, I mean, one thing the letter mentioned, when they had to close, I guess, essentially, or really cut back on the number of patrons, it's starting in March. It's just been too long. It's 7.5 months since then. And so there's no way, like, are 50 people allowed in? Like, have you been there in the last, say, month or two? Are you?
I haven't, just because I have a newborn. Like, I haven't been out in 5 months. Motherhood is really hard. But I mean, if I know that venues had to go to half capacity,
right?
And then it seemed as though, and like I totally respect Dr. Bonnie Henry. I think she's doing an amazing job with the pandemic, and same with John Horgan. I don't want to get political or anything like that, but I just want to say we're doing good compared to other health authorities in British Columbia.
Right.
But it seemed as though every time that a live music venue had a chance to get a leg up and be like, okay, we can do this, we can do something, we got shut down again. So, I mean, one of the things was, okay, so we can have live music, but we can't have dancing. Okay, but we can have live music, but we can't have people dancing in their chair. Okay, but we can have live music, but we can't have people singing along. Okay, but we can have live music. And then it just kept going on. And like the list just kept going on and on and on.
Right.
And now singers have to have plexiglass in front of them.
Oh, geez, hey.
And then bar owners got told, you guys are doing a great job, but we need to take it down a peg. Yeah. So now music, or live music, or what's going over your Sirius or whatever, cannot be louder than whatever your normal speaking volume is. And I think it's like, depending on where you are, I know at the Loft it was like 80 decibels or something like that. Wow. Which is crazy, because if I sneeze, it's louder than that. And it sucks. It just seems as though every time that our health authorities and our governments and our province goes to implement something new, of course, I believe they understand that it affects people, but I don't quite think they understand how it's affecting live music venues and ones that depend upon live music as their sole source of income, like their main source of income, like Logan's.
Yeah, no, the arts, I think, have been hit one of the hardest and are the slowest. I think there was those reports coming out of Toronto and Montreal, and the campaign to light up the buildings red.
That's right. Yeah.
Honor, and that was a little while back there. And I definitely, not being a musician or in that scene myself, it wasn't something I necessarily thought about or was on my radar. But we recently had a birthday party for my son, his 3rd birthday party. We had a backyard.
Oh, happy belated.
Very much. We survived 3 years so far. And, we had 10 guests and, socially distanced, and we were out in our backyard, and we had, I wanted to hire some musicians. So, we actually split our party into 2 different time slots. So we had the first group come for an hour and the second group come for an hour. That way we wouldn't have too big a group. And we had a different musician for each one. And the first one we had was a saxophonist, and he usually plays for like the government of Canada and like, top-notch shows. And he told me, so we were talking to him and we were saying, sorry, he was the second act. we were saying, my friend asked him, so how many shows do you do in a year typically? And he said 200. And this year, how many have you done? He said 2.
Yeah.
So it's just, I just can't imagine if this is the people, and we forget sometimes, a lot of us who aren't artists or musicians, we forget that this is somebody's livelihood. This is how they put food on their table and, keep a roof over their heads and, put clothes on their children, and they need that to have income. And so my other question, you as a music promoter, like, I mean, is this is your source of income? What's the next, thing look like? What's the next 6 months look like for you and for other people sort of connected to the music scene? Like, is this like where do we go from here? Is this sort of the end until we hear more, or?
That's a really good question. So 2540 Productions was something that I started in mid 2019, even though I'd been promoting under just my own name before that. This was a secondary income to me. This was not my full-time gig.
Okay.
But I was trying to build it into that.
Right.
And I had leads and I had contracts that were up island as well. And then COVID hit. And then it had to make me change my entire business model.
Yeah.
And then, of course, having a baby during a pandemic
Yeah.
Was also, like, that's, I don't wish that upon anybody. Like, that's awful. I mean, like, your partner went through that as well. I mean, it's just crazy trying times. What this means for my business model is I now have to seriously consider if my business model is sustainable in a post-COVID world. And quite honestly, I haven't had the time to put towards thinking about that as deeply as I should. However, my thoughts on that are that promoters, like small fries promoters like myself, need to take a serious hard look at if this is something you're going to have to do on a volunteer basis, or if this is something that you shut down entirely. And I've always, like, so my hashtag on all of my material and all of my posters, my promotional, has always been hashtag support local music. I need to stand by that now and consider working completely for free for probably the first year post-COVID, just to try to rebuild music in the community and rebuild my reputation as a promoter, because I mean most promoters end up getting a negative sort of reflection about them, that they're money hungry, they don't actually care about the music, and that's certainly not what 2540 is about. It's going to take a lot of back and forth on paper, I think, to try to figure out what this means for promoters. Large scale promoters, if you look at Ghost Finger Productions or Atomic, and I certainly can't speak for them, I can only say from an outsider's perspective, I think they'll do okay, but I think it's their employees that will end up suffering in the long run. And that, of course, is just my opinion based upon my own beliefs. I think that large-scale promoters will do fine. I think that small-scale promoters will have to go back to volunteering and rebuilding a name for a while.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's, as an entrepreneur myself, I mean, I'm fortunate that our business hasn't been, impacted really by COVID in a sense. But to think that you had sort of contracts and your business was growing and then just boom, that's really a hard, because you put so much into it. You have blood, sweat, tears, time, and that's just all gone in a sense.
Yeah, and like I worked really hard. I mean, like I was just going under my own name for about 2 years before I came up with my own business name. And the contracts that I had were up island, and I don't want to disclose my my partners here, but disclose their names. But I mean, like I had plans for March of this year. I had plans for April of this year that involved bringing bands from Victoria to Port Alberni and Nanaimo. Wow. And people were getting paid, and they were getting paid fair. Yeah. And that was part of my business model, is to make sure that people were paid fairly and for their time. And even if that meant that I didn't make as much as I felt that I was worth, it meant that the music itself was getting out there. Right. And that their time was compensated and that their hydro bill was taken into consideration when they had to rent jam space or buy a new tube for their amp, you know.
Yeah.
But that's not an option for me anymore. So it's just a matter of reevaluating. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of us will be okay. Most of us that are small-time promoters are absolutely in it for the music and not to make a profit. I know I certainly wasn't. I love the music scene in Victoria. I mean, we have stupid amounts of talent in the city. And like I was saying before, like there are so many people who can't play right now and they're just dying to play. Like will literally pay just to be on stage. Wow. To say, holy crap, I got a gig in 2020.
Yeah.
The saxophone player that you're talking about a few moments ago, where you said that he went from 200 shows down to 2.
Yeah.
Brett Smith Daniels had something stupid like 200 shows last year, and he posted something on his Facebook recently saying that he had gone from having 28 gigs a month to, so what's for dinner tonight?
Wow.
And he's a full-time musician. He's a brilliant musician. If you've ever had a chance to check out Brett Smith Daniels, he's amazingly talented. Oh my goodness, is he ever talented? But like I'm sorry?
I'm writing down his name right now.
Oh yeah, Brett Smith Daniels.
That's
Smith Daniels hyphenated. Yeah, he's remarkably talented, and it sucks because like I've known Brett for years in a professional and in a friendly manner, and to see him say, "Holy crap, can anybody help me out with a gig?" It's
that hits home.
Yeah, and it's so depressing because there is so much talent, and he is so good. And it's not that nobody wants to hear him play; it's that there's no place for him to play.
Right.
And just like, you know, Carla Olive or Mackenzie Brown, like anybody, they just don't have a place to play right now. And they don't have a place to really make cash. And the more venues that we lose in the city, the harder it's going to get for these folks who do make their living by selling a piece of their soul and selling a piece of their music every time they step on stage.
Absolutely. Well, that is why I'm glad we've had this conversation. I think this was a blind spot in a sense for me, and probably for many others, because, you know, as is often the case, the arts isn't necessarily seen. I want to be very careful how I word this, because I do creative writing, and, you know, I'm definitely a proponent of the arts, but it isn't seen always as something, you know, beneficial for the economy. Like it doesn't, you know, some, you know, critics might argue it doesn't really add anything of value or tangible.
Oh, it
does,
though.
No, it does. I mean, I don't, like, that's a whole different conversation, but just to say, so we forget, right? Like we're thinking grocery stores and essential services and healthcare workers, and, you know, is the mechanics, you know, can I still get a car or get my car fixed? But we're not thinking about music and musicians and art and those things that really add to our lives in a different way.
Absolutely. And the crazy thing is that if you go get your oil change done at Bay and Douglas at the, I can't remember which one it was, but there's 2 guys there that play in, what the heck are they called? Basically, the point of what I'm saying is the grocery store clerks are guitar players. The guy that's changing your oil is a drummer. Like, there's musicians all around you. And during the pandemic, we've done nothing but consume art. Like, how many hours of Netflix did you binge?
Yeah, more than I want to admit. For sure.
Loud and clear, right? Like, these are all arts, and we're consuming art. And even just looking at the room that we're in right now, somebody designed that lamp. Somebody designed the dresser that you're looking at. Somebody has designed this, and this is all creative, and this is all art. And we're consuming it, and nobody is paying for it.
Right.
It's, the deaf and disobedient. That's what I was thinking of. That's the guy that changes your oil at Bay and Douglas. Yeah, Gowan, I think his name is Gwen. I can't remember, but they sound like angry Silverchair. They're amazing.
Writing.
Yeah, please give those guys a shout out. Deaf and Disobedient. They're tons of fun.
All right.
I mean, there's art all around us, and we're forgetting that these people need to make a buck. So I mean, I know one of the things that the Loft is doing right now is they won't necessarily charge a cover, but they're encouraging people like, hey man, if you got a $5 in your pocket, throw it in a hat.
Right.
Like, please help these guys out. This is their livelihood, and we're consuming what has taken them hours to do. Do you play any instruments?
I played the trumpet for 3 years when I was in elementary school.
That's amazing.
That's it. And I play a harmonica from time to time, but that's it.
See, and it still takes skill to do all that. And it still takes money to actually purchase those instruments. And it takes time, away from your family, away from your young family to go out and actually practice them, right?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, like, you're not just paying for somebody's instrument. You're now paying for somebody's time away from their growing family.
Which is very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Well, thank you very much, Kelly. And I really hope this will probably get some conversation started. And, yeah, feel free to share our conversation. I'll send you a link as soon as I have it posted. And
Okay.
I'll make sure to drop a bunch of, if you wanted to follow up with an email or something after, we'll get a list in the description of some shout out to some local musicians, some local artists who are looking for gigs or could use some support.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you, Kelly, again. That was, I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Adrian. This was awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. No, it was my pleasure.
All right. Well, good luck with everything and stay safe.
You as well. Thanks again.
Thanks. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Okay.